something. People realized that, or it was taken as history until people realized that it was a piece of fiction.
And there are many others, like, for example, the story of the seven sleeps in the cave. That was that story was invented
that
by.
was a story with. Yeah, it was literally made up by like.
Can I just get your first argument
It
about
was made up by like a Syrian
fiction?
Oh,
sorry. You know how he was talking about how Alexander the Great, how it was a fiction. Now, first of all, many people believe that might have been Alexander the Great who built this wall, right? And if it was, in fact, he did build a wall called the Great Wall of Gorgon. Now, the Great Wall of Gorgon, right? And these two tribes have been they were part of the Middle Eastern they were involved in the Middle Eastern area. So the Great Wall of Gorgon is in fact part of Iran. Now, many scholars they do not know the exact location of these two tribes, right? And the Prophet Muhammad did prophesize that in the last hour that these two tribes will break through and they will demolish every single human being, living thing on earth, right? Now, what I'm saying is, some Muslim scholars do believe that the Quran was believed to be Alexander the Great, but that's what scholars think. The Quran's not talking about that specifically. He does not mention Alexander the Great specifically.
Yeah, I know.
That makes sense.
He calls him like the two-horned one.
Yeah, but on many like Greek coins, Alexander the Great was depicted as having two horns as well.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
and the story that he tells is mirrored in, like I said, a text that was a fictional account of the life of Alexander the Great written at the time.
There's many different like folk tales and all that, that circulated around that time in Muhammad's time and area that somehow ended up in the Quran. It's just like I can't believe that this is the word of God when Muhammad would have heard these things already before, and then they somehow end up in the Quran.
Yeah, and you'll find other stuff. I can't remember. I couldn't see who said it, but there was the story of the seven sleepers in the cave.
Yeah, that was me.
That was literally from like a bishop from I want to say like the 2nd or 3rd century.
Yeah, I think it was the 3rd century, like a Syrian bishop who wrote it. It was because of like Roman persecution and all that, and he wrote that to make the youth, happy or whatever. And then like that ends up in the Quran. There's also like the Syriac infancy gospels, all of the prophecies about, not the prophecies, all the stories about Jesus, like for example, him speaking in the cradle and him making the clay birds and bringing them to life. Like those were written before the Quran. The Quran was, actually sent down supposedly. So either these people who wrote these infancy gospels, they found the original gospels and they wrote about it like 400 years after, or Muhammad just copied them. And I think Muhammad copying them is a much more likely thing.
Real and true.
It's just things like this that just like make me not accept Islam. Like I just can't accept it.
Wait, did he leave?
I think his parents came into his room or something because he muted and deafened.
Oh,
yeah, that's fair.
enough.
It's pretty late for him. It's like 1 something.
Yeah. It's two now.
Actually, what time is it exactly?
2:12
in the UK.
Probably.
What? In the UK it's 2:12.
2:12. Okay, so that'll be 9:12. Good. I have to get home and shower before we have the T-Jump conversation. I'm driving right
Hey, is he still in the chat? Yes, he is. Thomas jumps in. There you are.
Hey, how's it going?
Do you know what the discussion is going to be with T-Jump?
It'll just be
he's back.
any questions or bones to pick that people from the server have. Actually, I have a question. Yeah. I have a question, real quick. Is your last name Jump, or is that like a?
Yes. Yes, my last name is Jump.
That's cool.
Yeah, that's actually really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it is not. You get a lot of "Hey Jump, why don't you jump" in high school.
Oh, really? Sorry.
I bro, EU, are you still
You
trying
don't
to
mind
prove Islam?
Is T-Jump a Christian, Muslim?
Nope.
I don't understand.
Atheist.
What are you guys
He's
going to
an
be debating?
atheist.
Oh, well, it should be interesting.
Okay, so before carry on.
Is he like a professor or something?
Apologies for a minute.
Yes, professor of
Yeah.
arts and
5 minutes.
sciences at Google. Google University.
I don't know where we left off. Can someone
What
someone
science?
wants to
At
tell me
Google?
something?
Google has
Google University.
We
Google
talking about-
University.
Google. Wait, so do we Google University or do we Google
Yeah, I got my
University?
master's at Bing.
Both.
Same.
Go got me good.
Pardon. Bro, are you trying to defend Islam? Are you trying to defend Islam? Carry
What
on.
way? I think everyone should defend their faith, no matter what it is. So
Nah, I'm
Yeah.
talking about like now. Like we were talking about Dulkarnain, and the last thing we said before you left was like, oh, there were coins that depicted him with 2 horns, and then you left.
Yeah, we were talking about the historical stuff. Although, wait, hang on, I wanted
Yeah,
to
like-
interject really quickly, just because you mentioned like the how does he know the day or the hour, etc. I don't think I ever mentioned that. Right. So, like, if you want, we can just continue to grant that that is indeed an error. But the main answer for that is, well, for one, when Jesus was on Earth, he willingly, didn't actualize some of his divine attributes. Like, there are times when he does, but for the most part, he doesn't, right? And as well, it's alluding to a Jewish wedding custom in which the father would sort of like, everyone would like know about the wedding, but it was a tradition where it'd be like the father would be the one to officially decide the day, he'd be the one in charge of it all. Excuse me, I need to drink some water.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you
Right.
need to look into you also need to look into the
like you
cultural
said.
context of what he's talking about in order to understand what he means by that.
Just first elaborate on his point and then I'll come back. So, like you said about his human form as well as his spiritual form. This is what I'm trying to get you at, right? Many people claim that Jesus was in fact God, right? But therefore, in the Bible, it even talks about that Jesus was the Son of God. So, is he God or is he Son of God? He can't be 2 things at once, in the sense that he can't be Son of God and then he can be God, right? Now you can say that Jesus was. If Jesus was on earth, then who was in the heavens? Because if God took his human form, let's say, right? If Jesus was a human form of God and he came on earth, then who was controlling the whole universe? Was it Jesus? Or I don't know who else it was, but who was it?
Hang on, I just undeafened. I just got back. Was he doing the whole "if God died, then who was running the universe"?
Oh,
No,
is
he
that
said that he said that how can Jesus be the son of God then also God at the same time? And like when Jesus was on earth, because he didn't fulfill his divine attributes, he was the one that was running the universe. That's basically what he said.
Right. Well, for
Yeah,
one,
true.
members of the Trinity, and also it's not like the divine nature changed. What we'd call, I guess, the hypostasis. I haven't really looked into philosophy of the Trinity too much because right now I'm looking into theism and Christianity in general. The reason I'm a Christian is because I think the inductive evidence has led me there so far, and it's just kept doing that. So I figured may as well, take a look into it, convert. And if I don't have the truth, then I don't have the truth. Who cares? But the main thing there is that the divine nature doesn't change, right? The hypostasis of the Son doesn't change. It was instead what we would call Jesus, is why we call him the 100% God, 100% man, is because it's a combination of the two natures. And I have to be really careful because Christians are really particular about this over centuries of philosophy. But I believe the two natures don't mix, but they are in one person. Yes.
I understand that you gonna.
Hang on, I can't hear you. But you're like really quiet.
Yeah, you're really like cutting out.
What I'm saying, if, God, Jesus was doing normal. He would defecate. He would urinate. He would be hungry. He could feel pain. God can't feel those things.
Well, that's why I say that's why I say in the divine nature.
It's human.
Like, there's the difference between the human nature and the divine nature. This is called the hypostatic union. It's arguably probably the most complicated part of Christianity, even more complicated than the Trinity. But even though God is mereologically simple, we wouldn't expect him to be complicated, or we wouldn't expect him to be, stupidly easy to understand.
Exactly.
It's like saying if you created something, would you want to be like your creation? Realistically, let's say you created, I don't know, fidget toy or something. Obviously, that you want to be that fidget, but it doesn't make sense. We don't want to be like
what? Oh, like a digital form? Did you say digital? I didn't really hear you.
I said if you want to be like, for example, I don't know, like a robot, right? Like you create a robot. Do you want to be like that robot? You don't want to be like, you don't want to be your own creation. Does that make sense?
I think that's God. Sorry, go ahead.
That just goes against the attributes of God. So you don't want to be like your own creation.
Well, we don't say that the attributes of God were, diminished or extinguished, but also I think that highlights one of the key differences between us and God, right? So the idea is that God loves us so much that he wants to be, kind of a part of the human experience, and he wants to, like, I don't exactly know how to describe it. Swinburne describes it a lot better. But, like, you want to be with humans. Yeah, he wants to relate to us. I woke up at like 4:30 yesterday and didn't get back until like 11 o'clock at night. But yeah, relate to us, form a relationship with us. And doing that by coming down and being more personal is, I think that's
Can I use the Kaaba as ad space?
What? You can?
Bro.
Like, who would I pay to put my ad on the Kaaba?
The Kaaba.
Muhammad.
Where is he? How can I reach him?
Hang on, where's that image that one guy just posted? Muhammad is atemporal or something?
You got a landline?
Muhammad. Sorry, anyways, you broke into
it.
Have any of you guys, looked into the religion of Islam and researched about it?
Yes, and I can conclude that it's 110% false. With all due respect to you.
Can I hear your argument, please?
Hmm?
Can I hear your argument? Oh,
I was talking about when you were gone, but basically, like a lot of like folk tales and like stories and all that circulated around Muhammad's time, are found in the Quran. Like, for example, the Syriac infancy gospels, like the miracles of Christ, speaking in the cradle, and him making clay birds and then bringing them to life. Like, these things were like written in like the 4th century and were circulating around Muhammad's time. So it's like it's like either these people who wrote the infancy gospels, they found the original gospels and then wrote about it in the 4th century, or Muhammad just found these stories and he put them in his book. And I think the second one is much more realistically true.
Before we carry on, not necessarily true. So we have the hadith. I don't know if you know about it. This is basically the sayings, the practicing of the Prophet Muhammad, and so the hadith is just more of like the lifestyle of the Prophet, what he did, and it's been recorded down. That's why you have Sahih Bukhari, and there's many types of hadith. You have weak hadith. You have you have weak hadith. You have many different types of hadith. I'm not gonna get into that now. In the Quran, it talks about the crucifixion of Jesus. It talks about how when I forgot. When the Jews came to take Jesus. In fact, there was one of the disciples, and he was willing to sacrifice himself.
I don't think you understood what I said. I'm saying that there were folk tales that were circulating around Muhammad's time in that area that somehow ended up in the Quran. Like, for example, Dhul Qarnayn, all of these, Syriac infancy, gospel miracles, they
So
end up in the Quran. So it leads me to
Dulkan,
believe that Muhammad heard, yeah, it leads me to believe that Muhammad heard these things from Jews and Christians or whatever, and he put them in his book to try and
the
persuade
only
them or whatever. Because he
people
thought, oh
that
wow, this
but
sounds really cool.
so
So that's why I'm saying that I can't
right
accept
now
this
I
answer
don't
to be
Dulkan.
came from God.
Yeah, I'll research into it. Now, for example, for the sake of argument, let's just say that was an error in the Quran. There was one error in the Quran. One error in the Quran is better. I don't know how many errors there are in the Bible. There's many. You know,
But that's not my. I'm not saying that it's an error or anything like that. I'm saying he literally just copied it. Why would God feel the need to copy whatever was whatever stories
you
were
know.
circulating around Muhammad's time. I
Listen,
can't accept the fact that God will copy some folk tales that some random guy wrote in the fourth century.
no, the
God
Dulkan.
wouldn't
So
do that. He wouldn't copy a story.
it's not
Multiple.
prophet. It's not the Prophet Muhammad. God. I mean, it's not the Prophet Muhammad's word, right? The Quran is God's word. It has no input from the Prophet Muhammad. That's why you have the hadiths for the hadith. If you look into the hadith,
Then
you'll see.
why would God but I'm saying obviously I don't believe the Quran to be the word of God. So obviously I'm gonna believe that it was Muhammad that wrote it. So like obviously if I come from that standpoint, I'm obviously gonna believe that Muhammad would be the one to put these stories in if he was the one that wrote it in my opinion.
So the making of the Quran, right? Let me just get this clear. It wasn't wrong. So basically, as we know, the angel Gabriel, he came to the Prophet Muhammad and he told him, verses of the Quran, um, and to tell these to the people, right? Now, what people would do, they would get anything close to them, any material, they would memorize it, they would write it down, and once they've got all these all the verses together, etc. And by the way, there was many people that would memorize what he said. So it's like me saying how produces milk. Many people are gonna memorize that. They know if they would copy that down. So they would as the Quran, they'll copy today. Right? He did not write.
You're breaking up. No one can hear you.
Yeah, I can't hear you. I thought that was
Yeah, I
just
haven't
me.
got a clue what you're saying.
Yeah, but even then, I could still, hear bits and pieces, and you're not addressing the point that I'm making. You're saying that, oh, look, the Quran was written down, people were writing it down and memorizing it. That's not addressing the point that I made, that Muhammad copied these folk tales and these stories. He copied them from
I
what
mean,
people were saying around him, and he
only
put them in the
both
Quran. You're not addressing the point.
the name and right now, as of right now, I do not know that much about that topic of.
Like, just forget Dulkarnain. Even like the Syriac infancy gospels and the, like, for example, the story of the seven sleepers. These things,
About
these are like established stories, like this, like the story of the seven sleepers. That was literally like created. It was a story that was made up. It's known to be made up. It's not like the infancy gospels, but these guys are claiming to be writing from the inspiration of God. The story of the seven sleepers, it's 1,010% a made up story, as well as, like, you quoted that verse, like, oh, if one man
wait, but in the Bible,
if you
when
kill
when
one man,
Jesus,
it's like killing all of
you
mankind. That quote about killing one man is like killing mankind. It's taken from the Talmud, which is basically the Jewish version of tafsir, so
but
the
like I'm saying,
Tanakh.
Quran,
So it's like,
the Torah was a part of we believe in the Torah,
no, but
we
it's
believe
not.
in
But
the
it's not the Torah. It's not the Torah. It's not the Torah. It's the Talmud. The Talmud is an exegesis.
and we gave it that
If
was
someone
that
if someone
we
explain it, it's like, for example, someone like making up their own holy book, and they start writing things that
but what
Ibn
part
Kathir said,
what
and then they say,
that
oh,
part
this is from the original text, but it's not from the original text. It's what Ibn
of
Kathir said, not Muhammad or Allah or anything
if
like
you
that.
verse in that scripture that you said, please show me. No, what I want to say is I don't know that much about the seven sleepers. Now, when Jesus talks about the parables, when Jesus talks about parables, for example, the great was it the great Samaritan? When Jesus talked about parables, they're not true. He used them as a as a moral, as a story moral. He used them as life lessons. Does he not? When he talks about parables,
But I'm
they're
not.
not
But these aren't parables. These aren't parables.
the
These are
life lessons.
fabricated stories that were written in the fourth
Exactly.
century that circulated around Muhammad's time. No. It's not. But they're not parables. These are different stories written by random people.
Are you trying to say they're allegorical,
It's just
Ibro?
No, that's the word.
no. I'm not saying.
Okay.
I'm not saying.
I'm sorry.
No, I'm talking
Excuse me.
about this.
Excuse me. I hate to interrupt. I'm
Oh, is it
kidding. I
6:30
really
already?
love to. But we are 1 minute away from the Q&A with Mr. Tom Jump over here.
I think
So
Ash
if we could wrap it up
Aish said she'd
quickly.
be running a little bit late.
I know, but we're officially starting at 9:30, and she gave me the go to do so.
All right, is it going to be here or the event podium?
I feel like it would be better to do event podium so everyone won't talk over each other. I feel like that could be a better way to do it.
So before we obviously go, can I just say how how you talk about how the story you have about fabrication? Many hadith they have been. We need to see if they're authentic or if they're fabricated. Now, please,
Still breaking up.
Yeah, I can't hear him.
Yeah. And you're still not addressing my point.
No, basically what I'm saying is when
You got Wi-Fi
when
in
you're
the
looking into a hadith, authentic. Okay.
You're not addressing my point.
What's the Tanzi?
Oh wait, can I talk?
Yeah, okay, so I might as well make the announcement right now. Alright, he's requesting, and
There we
Hey, how's it going?
hello.
I'm pretty good.
How are you doing today, Mr. Tom Jump?
All right.
That's amazing.
Okay. Well, are we ready to get going, or are we waiting for anything else?
I have no idea.
Yeah, we should be at this point. I'm just making the announcement.
Oh, okay. Well, as soon as you make the announcement, we'll go ahead. I'm gonna go first. Then we'll have Monquito talk. Jamie, Monquito wants to know if you're recording. Are you recording?
I mean, technically, T-Jump is already live streaming it, to be fair.
Okay. Is that, okay. In that case, Monquito, you can just look at his channel later. Okay. Before I start my line of questions, or rather like lay out an argument against what I take to be your position, which is what I plan on doing. Can you explain to me like the very basics of your epistemology and your method of solving underdetermination?
Solving there's no solution for underdetermination.
The lessening, not like solving it definitively. That wasn't what I meant.
The first one that works is the one that's rational to believe because it's harder to create a theory that can accurately predict the future than it is to post hoc rationalize one after the fact. So the first one is the best usually.
Yeah, the one which makes the novel predictions, which tells us something about the world. So when I haven't read a whole lot into epistemology, but I've read a very little bit. And from what I've read, I'm a kind of internalist foundationalist, and I take our method of knowledge, or our like way to knowledge of the world, is through like this set of givens which are non-propositional, like our immediate experiences of either our memories or the world around us or our feelings, and then we make an inference from those to something which is true about the world, or at least we hope it's true about the world. There are a bunch of different ways you could do this, and there's a bunch of different theories you could have about the world starting from this position and moving forward. You know, you could have the evil demon, you could have some sort of like solipsism, you could have the existence of my living room, which I'm in, and then nothing else in reality, and all of my other memories are just fake. And as far as I can tell, when you get to this position where you have this set of evidence, these like set of non-propositional seemings about the world, you're justified, at least I think you're probably justified in making an inference to some kind of explanation about this, like my memories are probably about events which actually happened, my seemings about the world are probably about the world which is around me. And when I've listened to you talk to people, it sounds like your method is going to give you an issue because you rely for lessening this problem of underdetermination between these different theories about the world around us. You rely for predictions, which you can test, which other theories won't give you. But your knowledge of the world, your theories about the world, at least as far as I can tell, are something which are moment to moment based. There isn't like this, like you need a synchronic theoretical virtue which allows you to, sorry, which allows you to say, like, this is probably true about the world right now. Now, because all of my like seemings about the world are, you know, in this moment. My memories are fallible. My memories could be wrong. I can have a theory about my memories, but I can't be certain about them. So when I've like listened to you talk about this, I have this issue where if novel testable predictions are the way we solve, or not solve, but lessen this kind of underdetermination, how are we able to get out of this initial moment where you have no diachronic virtues available because all of your evidence is, all of your like seemings about the world are from a synchronic perspective. All of them
Literally
are
none of it
from,
matters. Like if you have an idea that can give you an accurate projection of what the future is like and it happens, you're rational to believe it, even if there's infinitely many ways to explain that. So it doesn't lessen anything. You don't need to lessen anything. It's just, this is the idea that you had that accurately allowed you to predict your next experience. And so you're rational to believe it. That's all you
but
need.
no, but at the next moment, all you have is your memory of the previous moment. You don't have the actual
Doesn't matter.
previous moment which exists.
It
You
doesn't
only
matter.
have. But how? But you won't. You're forming a theory about the previous moment in the next
Sure.
moment, which includes I made this prediction in the past.
Sure. But again, doesn't matter. So you have an idea.
Well,
If that
but
idea
how
can
do
allow
you?
you to predict your next experience and it happened, whether you are accurately framing that idea or not, you're rational to believe it. Doesn't matter if you have access to it or not. It's just,
But
that's
you
your
don't know
experience.
if you made the prediction or not.
If you have the idea in your head that you made the prediction and it did happen, as far as you're aware, you're rational to believe it.
Weird. So you're saying that if you think you made a prediction, then you're justified in, and the prediction came true.
Yes. So if you had the belief that
Okay.
you made a set of predictions and all of those came true, you would be rational to believe whatever you thought caused you to get all those predictions right. Even if it's a delusion,
Okay.
you'd still be rational to believe it.
Thanks. That was my whole question. Okay, someone else can go now. Monkito, do you want to go?
I'm just sitting here.
Oh,
eating
you had
chocolate.
your hand raised.
Oh, I was gonna ask earlier. There was the question that you answered. I was wondering if this is being recorded.
Okay.
Yes, it's being recorded.
Okay, well, I'm gonna head out for now because that was my only question, but you guys have a good time.
Okay. So, If we have any people that want to talk or ask TJM questions on stage, you can raise your hand and I'll bring you up here. If you're unable to ask any questions, just text, just put it in the event VC text.
Yes, I'll just make a statement position. My position is I'm an atheist because I believe that all of the evidences are best explained by naturalism, and there's nothing that indicates the supernatural or God of any kind. There's no reason to rationally conclude that such a being exists, and it's more rational to conclude that naturalism is true.
Right. Okay.
Would anyone disagree? Think there's actually evidence of a God?
Oh, we have someone up here. Sorry about that. I didn't look for a second.
That's fine. I just raised my hand. I guess this is going to be a little bit boring until Ice shows up. So I guess I could just kind of ask, because I don't know too much about your position. Like, what's your opinion on, modality? What do you think? Do you think a necessary object exists? What do you think the properties of it are, etc.?
No, I don't think a necessary object exists, but even if we grant there is one, there's no reason to think it's conscious or has a mind. It'd be better explained by a quantum field or a mathematical object than a conscious being of any kind, because mind-based things like consciousness, goodness, whatever, are all composites. It's like all of the examples we have of any kind of consciousness are contingent composites of brains. And so to say that a consciousness related thing is the foundation of the universe is like saying a pineapple is the foundation of the universe. All the examples we have of pineapples are material things that are come about from trees. All the examples of consciousnesses we have are material things that come about from minds. And so to say that the necessary thing must have some kind of a conscious mind is equivalent to saying it's a pineapple.
Right. I mean, we could probably just say it has some sort of special kind of consciousness, if we're able to deduce that.
Well, I could
But
say it's a special
I see
kind
your
of
point, yeah.
pineapple too. That's the point, is that all the
Yeah, sure.
evidence
Then
we have
eventually we'll
is
just be getting to, yeah, sure. Then it's just whatever we'll be describing, we might just be assigning different labels.
well, no. So like if it has an essence that isn't conscious and is a abstract concept of a pineapple, that means it would definitely be different concepts. So the same concept does not work as a counter argument.
As in, we'd be describing the same concept if we.
No. So again,
never mind.
they necessarily be different. Pineapples have no relation to consciousness. So to say it's conscious would necessarily be a different thing.
I think you're missing my point. Like, if we were to deduce that it would be some sort of consciousness like that is an immaterial one, then you'd be describing it as something else. Like,
no, so it cannot in any way be conscious of any kind. That's the pineapple one has zero analogy to consciousness. So they're necessarily.
I'm just referring to
what?
I'm referring to if we manage to deduce that. I haven't gotten too far on stage 2.
So if you want to say that it entails consciousness in any sense, I can say that it entails a pineapple in the same sense, because consciousness is all the evidence of consciousnesses we have come from brain. All the evidence of pineapples we have come from trees. And to say that there is some more fundamental sense of consciousness, I could just say there's more fundamental sense of pineapple, because those would be separate things. I don't think anybody thinks pineapples are intrinsic to the necessary being. So to say that pineapples have some kind of intrinsic quality of necessariness is just completely ad hoc. And that would be the same as saying consciousness itself is somehow fundamental.
Right. That's not exactly what I'm saying, but I get your point. All right, here. One last question, because, I'm just here to kill time. What's your opinion on the PSR? What PSR, if any, do you hold to?
None of them.
What
I don't
is
think the
PSR?
principle of sufficient reason is required. Brute contingencies are possible. Therefore, the PSR is not required for anything.
All right, then. Are you going to stick around on the server after? Because I probably want to ask you about an argument for the PSR in text. I woke up at like 4:30, so I'm really tired. Can't do anything over VC right now.
Sure. But it'd be better to post it in mine or my DMs or something, because that's where I check most often.
Yeah, sure, I can DM you that. And then what's your opinion on, the weaker PSR then? You reject that as well?
Yes, because I mean, brute contingencies are a fact. So if there's a thing that is contingent that can exist without any explanation at all, then there's
Well,
no.
the weak PSR concedes that. Like,
Well, that's fine.
like it just says everything, you know. Like
I think
facts
all of the
postulated
PSRs are made up by philosophers and have no correspondence to reality whatsoever. It's philosophers making stuff up.
I see. All right. Well, are you familiar with oh my goodness, I'm suddenly forgetting his name. Della Rocca's argument for the PSR.
Not off the top of my head, no.
All right, it has to do with explicability arguments. I'm way too tired to explain it right now, though, so I can probably just DM you later then.
Sure. Just had a conversation with Joe from Majesty of Reason on this, the PSR arguments.
Nice. Is that video up on YouTube?
Yep.
Cool. I'll have to go find that.
All right. You're next, Barry Dillon.
Just an open-ended question to kill time. What's a naturalist's take on morals?
I'm a moral naturalist, so I think that morals are objective. Moral statements have a truth value independent of opinion. Lots of different versions of that. I think it's kind of like a law of nature kind of a thing. It's a fundamental part of reality that is described in physics, and you don't need any kind of supernatural entity for that.
So if you find out that something is objectively moral, why should you do it?
Well, shoulds are something we add. Once we know it's moral, then we amend the shoulds ourselves. The shoulds aren't in the morality. Like you can ask, is something moral because you ought to do it, or ought you do it because it's moral?
Yeah, I guess my question is kind of just an is ought.
Right.
So there is no like solving the is ought, and
no, you don't need the ought. So is something moral because you ought to do it, or ought you do it because it is moral?
What I'm saying is
it's question,
objectively moral.
Question for you. So just try to answer the question. Is something moral because you ought to do it, or ought you do it because it's moral?
Honestly, I just came on here to kill time and not really debate. I'm really tired.
Well, it's not about answering your question, so it's not meant to debate. If you ask, is an ought intrinsic in morality, you can answer that question by asking, should you do something? Is it moral because you should do it? Or should you do it because it's moral? Which is more important to the essence of morality?
I would guess the latter.
I would agree. So I would say that something is moral. You ought to do it because it's moral. That means that the morality is completely separate from the oughts. The oughts are something we add later. Once we know some set of facts that describe something as moral, then we ought to do it because it's that set of facts. But the oughtness isn't one of those facts. So the ought part, you don't need in morality. You just, here's the set of facts of what morality is. And then once we know what it is, then we add on the ought. We ought to do it.
All right. I guess Ethan can go on now.
All right. A couple of questions I want to ask from the event VC text. If you work out T-jump, what is your bench, deadlift, and squat PR? Short for personal record.
I don't remember my PR. I would do 225 for reps.
And that's for
benching.
And that's okay. Deadlift and squat.
Can't do deadlifts or squats because I hurt my back, so I stopped doing those a long time ago.
Okay, understandable. I think this question's already been answered about what your meta-ethical position is. You said you're a moral naturalist. You believe morality is objective.
Yep.
All right, so yeah, you're a moral realist. Next question would be, does T-Jump think there's evidence for theism? In the parentheses, he says, even if he thinks it's overridden by evidence for naturalism. For example, consciousness is entailed by theism, since at least one consciousness exists, namely God.
I think the only thing that actually counts as evidence, and it's incredibly weak evidence, is the prediction of the age of the earth in Hinduism. That's the only thing that's real evidence of a god. I think everything else is just bad arguments that aren't in any way evidence of a god.
All right. All right, understandable. We have another person up here. Great friend, Heathen Research. Come up here.
you for inviting me. I just have 2 questions. Tackle these questions however you want. That is not my choice. What are your thoughts on the tradition of German idealism from Hegel to Schelling, and specifically, what do you think of the continuation of German idealism through Slavoj Žižek and Marcus Graeber, who are contemporary continental philosophers?
I
If
think that
I'm
it's
pleasing.
I think that it's pretty not well defined. I think that Hegel's proprietary uses of languages don't give a coherent definition of what he's actually talking about, and so I don't find his worldview coherent enough to really have an opinion on. Same with Heidegger. I don't think they did good at explaining what exactly they were trying to talk about. I think Slavoj Žižek is an interesting political philosopher, but I don't think his interpretation of Hegel makes it any clear what exactly it's supposed to be.
Have you read any of the works of Marcus Gabriel? Because I think out of the current contemporary continental philosophers, he makes his mission an objective towards the sublime thought clearer than Slavoj Žižek. I would even argue in a more specific and almost analytical form.
I have not really done much research into the continuations of the work of Hegel because I didn't understand the work of Hegel.
I would recommend looking into Marcus Gabriel. I think he's an interesting figure. That would summarize all my questions. Thank you for answering them.
Yep.
All right. We have a couple more questions from the chat. One question would be, why be rational? I know it's a bit ambiguous, but answer it however you want.
If you want to be rational, that would be the reason of why be rational. If you don't want to be rational, that's perfectly fine too. So you don't need to be rational for any reason. But I think that naturalism is the rational position, whether or not you like being rational.
Oh, okay. Now the next question is the God of the Bible logically contradictory?
Depends which Christian you talk to. Many of them are, yes. I don't think necessarily it is, but I think that many versions of how Christians understand the Bible are probably logically contradictory.
Right. That's a fair enough response. I don't want to make sure I miss any more questions. Okay, so are you familiar? Just a little bit of a question before, like a prior question before I ask this. Are you familiar with Rasmussen's counting argument?
I think so. I think I've talked with him 3 or 4 times about it.
Okay. So, a fellow friend of mine wants to know your objection to Rasmussen's counting argument, if you have any.
You'd have to present the argument. I don't remember what it's supposed to say.
I could. Well, no, that's an adaptation of someone else's argument. Okay, so anyways, so a couple of oh man, I don't know how long ago this discussion, but you and Isaac from Ask Yourself had a conversation about morals and about abortion as the broad topic, and you were asked about you're asked about what does killing a baby is wrong mean. You said it was immoral, and he asked what does it mean that it's immoral mean, and you said that it means killing a baby is out of line with some kind of law of the universe. And he asked what does that mean, and then you said it means that killing a baby isn't instantiation of some kind of abstract object.
No. So what it means is it corresponds to some fact in reality. And so that's the end of the discussion. Isaac just didn't understand that. So like if you say gravity is curvature of space-time and you ask, what does that mean? There is a thing, space-time, and it physically curves. That's the end of the question. So the meaning of the words is given to correspond to some fact of reality, and the fact of reality is a moral fact.
Right. Okay. Right. And you still hold to like what you originally said in that discussion with Isaac, or have you had a bit of a change ever since?
No.
Okay, that's fair enough. This one is a little bit of a broad question as well. I don't know how to ask this. It just says determinist question mark.
Yes, sort of. So a determinist in the case of free will. I think free will is impossible, but in the case of physics, indeterminacy is a thing. So I'm happy to grant indeterminacy in the context of physics, but I'm still a determinist in the context of free will.
Right. And next question would be which Christian conceptions of God are logically contradictory? Which contradictions specifically?
The ones that say we have free will, but God knows everything we're going to do before we do it. That one's contradictory. The one that says God is all powerful and can do literally anything, but he can't create a rock so heavy he can't lift it. So you can just change the definitions of all powerful to be anything logically possible or whatever. But the ones that are specifically entail things that require some consequence that people say can't do, those are the ones that are contradictory.
Right. So the next question would be, do you have any thoughts on historical case for the resurrection?
Yes, I've studied the evidence for the resurrection a lot. I had a number of conversations on it. The consensus in both law and history is that testimony doesn't count as evidence for things that don't have an empirical basis. So miracles, magic, mythical creatures, paranormal, the supernatural, UFOs. No amount of testimony for those things will count as evidence until there's something more than testimony to show that they exist. And so if you have testimony of the resurrection, that isn't evidence historically that it actually happened. That's evidence that people said it happened, and that's it. And there are many. It's a common occurrence in history for people to include mythical things like Romulus and Remus being raised by wolves and founding Rome or whatever. None of that's taken seriously in history. None of the miracles, magic, mythical creatures, paranormal, supernatural UFOs, none of those are taken seriously in history for the exact same reason. People's testimony doesn't count as evidence of things that have no empirical basis in reality. And so I believe Jesus existed as a human being and lived and did Jew stuff, but he didn't rise from the dead or do any miracles. And that's the historical consensus on the topic.
Okay. So about the question earlier that I asked about if you had any objections to the counting argument. So this is just a refresher of the argument. Premise one would be, for any class of physical property, there is at least one or more mental property for thinking that the physical property is physical. Premise two, there are more classes of physical properties than there are physical properties. This would be Cantor's theorem applied. Premise three would be, it therefore follows that there are more mental properties than physical properties. Premise four, and finally the conclusion, conclusively, not every mental property is necessarily a physical property. What would be your objections to this argument?
All mental properties are physical properties. Reject that premise. So, yeah, I'm a physicalist, so I think the brain is physical. It means all of our thoughts are physical. That's what the consensus in neurology, psychology, cognitive science, every mind-related field is, that thoughts are physical things and they have weight. And so the fact that there is a potential for thoughts to exist and not be physical, which I think it's logically possible, and therefore it's logically possible that there are more ideas than there are physical states. That doesn't matter because there's no evidence of it actually existing. So until there's actually evidence that there's something more than physical thoughts, that there are in fact non-physical thoughts, then there's no evidence that there are more non-physical thoughts than physical states.
Right. So we have another question about the hard problem of consciousness, and it seems to be that when you explain your position, it seems to be more of a reductive physicalist position, and this person wants to know how you solve that problem.
Well, if I solve it and win a Nobel Prize, then you will know. We don't have a solution. No one has a solution. Idealism and panpsychism don't have a solution. There is no solution to the hard problem of consciousness yet. We are currently just, the best thing is to wait for the science. And that's, once the science progresses, it will probably have an answer. And that's the best inductive solution we have.
Right. That's fair enough. And if you haven't debated Canadian Catholic, when are you going to debate him?
6 or 7 times we've debated.
6 or 7 times you debated, and all these have been recorded?
Yep. They're all on my channel.
Interesting. Interesting. You're always prepared, it seems. So, do you think the Trinity is illogical?
Probably. I think most conceptions of the Trinity are pretty illogical. If you say that God and Jesus share literally every property, then obviously that's illogical. So you have to give some kind of special class that they share some property, but not all properties. And you can make something up that isn't illogical for that. But I definitely don't think they can be the same person. No.
Right. Also, real quick, if anyone's raising their hand and just tell me in event VC text because I'm only focusing on that area because I'm asking T-Jump the people's questions that are not able to come up and talk. So the next question would be, well, I think this question's already been answered, Justin. So the next question would be, given T-Jump's epistemology, which states that only empirical evidence can substantiate the existence of real things external to your imagination.
What?
How does T-Jump explain the? Well, actually, it's like, yeah, it's like a 2-sentence question.
Say it again slowly.
Do you want me to just leave you off with the first sentence and then ask the second?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so given T-Jump's epistemology, which states that only empirical evidence can substantiate the existence of real things external to your imagination.
That's not true. So that part's wrong. Like I say, anything that can differentiate imagination from reality does that. Empirical evidence is the most reliable way we have to do that, the only one I know of. So what's the second question?
Okay, so the second question is, how does T-Jump explain the success of theoretical conceptual physics using mental objects and mathematics at describing real events such as Einstein's theory of general relativity, predicting the existence of black holes before any black hole was to be observed?
So every empirical theory starts off as a concept in the brain. So like all of them, like my epistemology states that everything starts as imaginary first. So if you have any kind of prediction, you're starting off with an imaginary concept, a hypothesis, and then you think, if this hypothesis is true, here's what I would expect to see. So all hypotheses start off as conceptual, and then you make predictions which are confirmed empirically, but obviously the model itself isn't empirical. Like Einstein's theory of general relativity isn't empirical. Newtonian mechanics isn't empirical. It's like the math isn't empirical. It makes predictions that are empirical.
Right. And just for clarification, do you think that thoughts have weight?
Yes. Literally. You can Google it. Do thoughts have weight? And they can tell you the actual measurement for it.
Okay. So, trying to look if there's any more questions. Doesn't. I'm slowly scrolling. Okay, so another question is life meaningless? Another broad question.
No, I'm a moral realist. I think that there is meaning and purpose without a God.
Right. What is your max hip thrust?
I don't know.
All right. Okay. Do you have any, since your chair has been around for a while, does your chair have any, does it have any bad odor?
No.
No. It usually gets cleaned, I'm assuming.
Yes, there's leather treatment stuff. It does very well.
Okay. Now, next question, going back to serious questions. Do we generate meaning and purpose?
Sure. Do we generate it? Yes.
Right. And do you have any thoughts on fine-tuning?
So the fine-tuning argument is the argument that of all the different combinations of the laws of physics, only a very small percent can allow for life. Problem is that for each different possible combination of the laws of physics, there is also a potential God who would want that potential combination. So of all the different possible variations of God, there's a very small amount of variations that would create a life-permitting universe equal to the number of variations in the laws of physics that would produce a life-permitting universe. Therefore, God is equally as fine-tuned as the universe. The solution would then be to say, oh, there's only one way God could be. He's a necessary being, in which you could just say, oh, no, the universe is a necessary being. So the fine-tuning problems applies equally to God as it does to the universe, and saying God is the solution just kicks the can down the road and doesn't solve anything.
Okay. So next question would be your thoughts on veganism. This could be answering just general veganism, ethical veganism.
Yes, veganism is the morally correct position. Killing anything with consciousness is immoral if it doesn't want to die. And so vegans are correct, but they're extremely annoying, and I don't care. I'm going to continue to eat cheeseburgers.
That seems to be a little weird, coming from me, about how you agree that it's wrong to kill any conscious entity, but you're going to continue to buy something that's going to demand more people to kill these conscious entities.
Yep. So I am immoral, and I am okay with that. So knowing what objective morality is and caring are two completely separate things. So I can know something is objectively moral and just not care.
Right. And okay. So if you had to make an objection to abortion, which one would it be?
So I would say that abortion is self-defense. If someone else is in your body without your consent, you have the right to remove them with force. It is immoral to kill anyone ever for any reason, but it's a justified immoral action.
Right. And I guess this next question already has been answered by the previous question. What do you think about abortion? You seem to be pro-life.
No, I'm pro-choice. It's a justified
Oh.
immoral action. So it's self-defense. Abortion is self-defense. Self-defense is okay.
So I guess your position would, I guess the proper identification would be evictionism.
Sort of. Just self-defense is just the legal position. So if you just check the definitions of self-defense and use of lethal force, it's on there.
Okay. So what makes consciousness important?
I think that if we follow the evidence of moral intuition and moral progress, it just leads to the fact that morality describes conscious things. So it's the conclusion of what, if we follow the evidence, what does it seem to lead to?
Right. And so another question being asked on brains. is what determines me being conscious in my brain and experiencing my brain's sensations rather than another brain's?
Physics.
Okay, pretty straightforward. And again, just for clarification, what do you use to justify your morals if you haven't said it before?
Law of physics.
All right. Now, I guess one. Oh, it seems to be you didn't answer the question about if you had to make an objection to an abortion, what would it be?
Oh, so you're killing any conscious thing ever is always immoral. That would be the first part of the answer I gave.
Okay. Yeah. And I guess a rebuttal to what you said before, I guess on the bodily autonomy scenario you brought up. Can we do whatever to someone unconscious and or dead, such as necrophilia?
If they're in your body, yes.
Okay, because there seems to be a contra bodily autonomy if and only if inside someone. And this is an example.
Well, bodily autonomy only applies to your body. So if it's literally affecting your body, that's what makes it bodily autonomy, is that you need to be able to have it not affect your body.
Right, but this is an example that I'm quoting off of someone else. This is an example I've been toying with, and it's a bit weird, but bear with me here. Imagine you're having sex with someone. They're pretty hot and also skilled in bed, so it's been a fun night. However, they also have a rare medical condition that didn't really inform you about. Now imagine that while they are inside of you, you're you're on top, so just go along with it. They're holding you pretty tight too. It's pretty hot, but to your surprise, the medical condition kicks in, and they suddenly freeze up and lose consciousness. Their grip tightens on you as their muscles involuntarily contract and slouch forward, trapping you against the bed. And they're big and tall, and they're inside of you, and you really want them out. It's uncomfortable as hell, and you didn't sign up for this, but you can't get them off, and through no fault of their own, they're stuck inside of you. You have a gun in your bedside drawer. If you shoot them, they'll die, and their muscles will stop contracting, and you'll be able to push them off. According to your bodily autonomy principle, them being inside of you and you being unable to get them out except by lethal force, shooting them and head seems justified.
Yeah, if there was literally no other way to get them out of you, then yes, you would be self-defense, because that's technically rape. So yes, that is actually a legal case. You can literally do that.
Oh wait, someone wanted to ask their question. They're not here anymore. Yeah, you can ask your question up on stage. I don't know if you're still here. Anyways, so just to clarify on you, like the previous question determining you being conscious in your brain and experiencing your brain sensation rather than other brains. So there's a law determining which brain I experience sensations from?
Yes, it's physics. It's literally your physical brain is held together by electromagnetic forces, the strong and weak electromagnetic force, and which produces your consciousness. And so it's produced in a very specific location because of the laws of physics. So yes, it's the laws of physics that determine why your consciousness is there and not somewhere else.
Sorry I'm so late. I had like a lot of stuff today. But probably just gonna have to listen in for a little bit, but I do have questions about that one. I don't know if this has already been asked, but I'm curious, like, what your view on consciousness is. Like, do you think it's reductive? Like, I don't know if you know, like, Thomas Nagel's take on consciousness and whether it can be reduced to pure scientific and like scientifically observable phenomena. But like, I'd be curious to hear what your take is on that.
Yes, I am a physicalist, so I think that it's purely physical. I think that's the consensus in neurology, psychology, cognitive science, and all of the major brain sciences right now. So I go with them. I think that, yes, it is purely physical.
But do you think that, like, I think that Nagel at least makes a good point in that there is a certain first personal aspect to consciousness that really can't be mapped when it comes to like scientific description, because that's by nature third personal. I don't know. Like, I think he makes a good point with that.
Sort of,
So-
yeah. So math doesn't describe everything. So physics, the math in physics can't describe everything. It can't tell you what a particle is made of. It just tells you how it interacts with other things in the nearby system. So physics can never, with just the math, tell you the essences of things. And when you're talking about consciousness, you're talking about the essence of a thing. And so the mathematical descriptions in physics aren't going to give it to you, but it doesn't give you that what matter is made of either. So that's not really a problem that physics can't describe what consciousness is made of or what particles are made of, because math only describes interactions. So it's not really a huge problem in physics.
It's not, I mean, I don't think it's necessarily even talking about, well, I guess, you know, you say the word essence, but I don't think essence, even as a term, is like reducible to just what something is made of. Like, I think it's more than that. And a big part of it is like its nature. And like, I think the nature of consciousness, like, I don't think that can be entirely described by physics. I think that's pretty reductionist.
Well, physics, again, can't describe everything. So I agree with you. Physics can't describe the essence or what the nature of the thing. It can't describe the nature of matter. It just describes interactions. And so obviously it wouldn't be able to describe any of the nature, the fundamental nature of things, whether it's consciousness or matter. But that doesn't matter, because the math that we use to describe physics isn't physics itself. It's just a representation of physics. And so the fact that our representations can't represent everything, it doesn't mean it's not made of physical stuff.
Sure. So do you just think it's like a gap in our knowledge, and like you're just kind of like, do you just think it's undiscoverable? Like, is it just a gap almost?
Undiscovered for now. I don't think it's undiscoverable. I think that we will have an advancement in physics and we'll get more stuff than just the equations, and then we'll understand what that kind of stuff is.
Really? Because like, okay, like this was my take on it, because that's kind of the take. Like, Nagel is very agnostic epistemologically when he's like talking about this stuff. So he's like, yeah, well, you know, like right now we don't have the resources for science to describe some kind of first personal consciousness, right? But like, I honestly, like, most of his work makes me take a more hardline stance, and I think he could take a more hardline stance, because like, I think the very nature of science goes against its ability to describe something like this. The very nature of science, the way that science works, the scientific method, I think that they're all by nature third personal. And I think it would be a contradiction to say that you could describe something like that with something that is first personal using like third personal methodology.
I don't think there's anything in science that says it can only describe third person things. I think that's just our current science does that de facto. It's not like a law of science. We can only describe third person things.
I mean, but that's pretty much like, well, I mean, I guess you could expand what you mean by science, but like right now, at least, it's kind of based on things like observation, etc., right? Which kind of makes, and like experimentation, which in nature cannot capture, like you cannot fully convey that first personal aspect.
Right.
So I don't know.
Well, there's lots of things in science we can't do that for. That's why I gave the example of matter. Like, we can't express the essence of matter in using interactions in physics. Physics only uses derivative equations to measure how something can change over some metric like time or whatever, but it doesn't can't describe anything in a stationary position. That's why you can't discover something's position, momentum, and position at the same time. It's impossible because physics just can't do it right now. But that doesn't mean that it can never do it. So it seems like your argument is that inductively our physics works this way, therefore it will never be able to do more than this, or something along those lines.
Well, sort of, but I think it becomes more of like a contradiction rather than like a limitation by its current kind of progress. Like, I don't think it's something that's necessarily just because it's like limited right now and like we don't have the resources. Like, I understand that, you know, like science is progressing at like an exponential pace. I'm not saying that we're not going to reach some amazing new conclusions like literally tomorrow, but the thing is, I think there's a very big difference between saying, oh, this is what is possible to kind of like understand and like what the scope of physics is, versus like, okay, well, this is kind of a contradiction to say that physics could describe this. So, I mean, like, that's my opinion on it, but
why would it be a contradiction? Like, as far as I know, there's nothing in science that says we can never describe first-person experience.
Because at least in my opinion, the way that the scientific method works, using observation, using, you know, like experimental methods and stuff, I think they're all based on third personal.
Sure.
Reckoning. So
for now,
the core of science is third personal. So, I mean, I guess maybe if you said like, oh, well, we could discover a new method of like, I remember that we were talking about this, like there's an idea that maybe you could kind of transfer this like first personal aspect in some way, or this is an idea someone had at least, through like language or like stories or poetry or something like that. So I'm not saying that like, but I think to say that science could do all that kind of goes against the nature of science. I mean,
well, the scientific method changes all the time. The scientific method is just whatever works. No one really cares about why it works. And so if there's
then what do you think science is?
Method to differentiate imagination from reality.
Okay, that's interesting. But do you think so? I mean, like, I'm gonna fully admit, like, I really don't know anything about your philosophical views. So I'm curious, like, where do you stand, like, on metaphysics and epistemology? Because, like, me, I'm vaguely an idealist. I'm kind of exploring different kinds of idealism, but it's always kind of interesting to hear where other people stand. So.
Sure, I'm a metaphysical naturalist. I think naturalism is the best explanation for what exists. Physicalist for the brain. I think there's only physical stuff. Epistemology. I wrote my own epistemology. I think that we need some way to differentiate imagination from reality, and novel testable predictions is the best way to do that. And so I think that the best way to justify beliefs about anything being true outside of your imagination is if you can accurately predict something about the future that we don't know yet.
Okay, that's interesting. What I don't like, I find a lot of what you said to be reductive. So I'm just curious why. I mean, like, even just taking into account your like metaphysical naturalism, like, why is that something that you hold to, and like, why do you feel it adequately explains?
Because of the successful predictions. So I wouldn't say it's reductive, because you can add things with testable predictions too. You can say, like, I believe God exists. If God exists, he'll give me a gold brick when I pray. And then you pray, you get a gold brick. That would be additive. So you'd add something there. The reason reductionism works very well is just because that's what successfully made the novel predictions throughout most history. So we've always just been.
What do you think of Hume, though?
Of Hume? I think Hume was a very interesting philosopher in lots of respects.
Like, because I don't know, I found him pretty convincing actually in many ways. So I'm curious, like, what you would think of his problem of induction and things like that. Because obviously, you said one of the biggest reasons you believe in these things is power to make predictions. But obviously, Hume is kind of making this claim that these predictions are purely based off of custom and not reason.
Well, yeah, I don't care what method you use to come up with a hypothesis. You can make any hypothesis you want. Like you can say, my magic 8-ball was created by a magical leprechaun that created the universe, and then the magic 8-ball gives you predictions. That's fine. So I don't care about the method that you use to come up with your hypothesis. All I care about is the success of the hypothesis. So to me, it wouldn't make a difference.
Then in that sense, you're kind of like saying that, see, the thing is, like, for one, he says that we explain unsuccessful hypotheses. So for example, if we make a hypothesis and it doesn't succeed, then we say, okay, well, it's because, you know, X factor was different and therefore it affected it differently. But the fact is that every situation is going to be uniquely different in some way, shape, or form, right? So he says there's no way to predict using purely reason, like no deductive method that's actually grounded in reason to predict anything or to even explain simply cause. So it's not really like, in my opinion, I find this pretty compelling in a way, in that I don't think that, like, what you're saying, like, I understand what you mean, like, if it works, it works, but it's custom at the end of the day. So it's kind of like an appeal to Izzat. You not grounded in reason, then there's nothing active about it. It's just like whatever kind of works, and it's kind of just an appeal to pragmatism. Kind of sounds like almost like Lockean in a way with its justification. I don't know.
Well, there's no deductive proof of essentially anything. We can never prove anything with certainty. The question is what are we rational to believe? Are we rational to believe something that we came up with this idea in our head for whatever reason, and we say this idea can predict the future in this way, and everything else is very, very bad at predicting the future. It's very hard to predict the future, and this one thing is very good at it. And then is it rational to believe that that one thing that's very good at it is a better belief or more likely to be true than the other beliefs we have that are very bad at it? And the answer is yes. So we don't need some absolute connection to the fundamental nature of reality to know which one is 100% right. We just need to say, is this one better than the other ones we have? And it can do something the other ones can't. And so we're rational to believe this one is true.
So, I mean, the thing is that the way that you're describing, see, rationality is often, you know, used interchangeably with something that is reasonable, right? But reasonable being grounded in reason. But like reason alone cannot give you these conclusions. At least that's what the belief is that like I propose. So my question is, like, aren't you just making an appeal to pragmatism? Like, of course, like, okay, this is at least what my professor, this example, it's a little silly, but my professor uses this example. Like when you walk into a classroom, then, and you're like, the ground is there under your feet, you pragmatically don't like walk out fearing that that ground is going to fall away, right? And so there's some continuity, and like this kind of custom definitely is of value, but like I don't see how it has any like objective philosophical value. It's more just like, okay, well, this is what it seems to be like, so we'll believe this for pragmatic reasons, sure, but like, why should I care? I behave that way on instinct anyways. It doesn't have any actual descriptive power, if that makes sense.
I'm not exactly sure what you're asking there. So like pure reason, we're obviously not using analytic pure reason. We're saying I have a idea. I made up a theory of the world, materialism or whatever. And I said, if materialism is true, if my idea is right, here's what I would expect to see, my next sensory experiences. Now, we could all be in the matrix. Sensory experiences could all be wrong. But if I have one idea that can accurately project what I'm going to future experience, and my other ideas cannot do that, then I'm rational in trusting that first idea that can future predict things, and more so than any of the other ideas. It doesn't need to be 100% true. You don't need infallible knowledge of reality. You're rationally justified in believing that one because it's better at working than the other ones.
But like, my question is, like, where are you drawing this line of what is rational and what's not? Because it kind of just seems like, I don't know, like, it seems almost like I can't quite tell where you're drawing that line, because it's like, okay, well, it just works, but like, how, you don't know what works before like it works, and then you're already relying on, again, like predictive abilities, which again are not backed by reason. So I don't like I see where you're like I get what you're saying in terms of like I think what you say has pragmatic utility, but like I don't get why like it has philosophical utility. That's my only question.
Well, reason and rationality are essentially just the premise follows from the conclusion, or it increases the probability the premise is true. Like that's all you really need for rationality or reason. So is it more likely that a belief that can accurately predict the future corresponds to reality than the infinite number of beliefs that can't? Yes. That's all you need.
But how do you tell that a belief can accurately? There's no reason backed. Like that's my whole point, right? Like this isn't a logic that's backed by reason. It's backed by custom. So like for example, you're saying, okay, well, if it like follows, then it's reasonable, but like you won't know if it follows until it does. Like that's and again, I'm taking a very Humean stance here. Like don't get me wrong, I'm not even Humean, but I'm just curious because I mean this would be like a major objection to like the kind of views that you've outlined.
Well, again, I'm not using any custom here. I'm just saying cogito. I think, therefore I am. And I have lots of these different experiences where I see and feel and think stuff. And I'm very bad at predicting what I'm going to feel and think and say next. But if I have a model that can do it, that model is better than the other thing that can't do it.
Do you think the cogito is even like, I mean, coherent? Like, really, yes. Descartes, I mean, I find Descartes to be like viciously circular in every aspect.
Well, I don't think he can be viciously circular in every aspect because not all of his arguments are circular. But the Cartesian circle is the argument that cogito indicates a god or mind of some kind. That part's viciously circular. That's the part Bertrand Russell critiqued when he said
yeah, I was gonna say Russell.
But,
yeah.
But that has nothing to do with the cogito simpliciter. It's just the cogito is just I think or I exist. It's just you have this experience. This thing is occurring, and you're going to label it with I, and that's all it is. So experience is like a rock. It's a thing that exists. And then the cogito, the argument is just a description of that thing. So the argument doesn't mean anything. You don't get knowledge because you're following the premises to a conclusion. It's just a description of this thing that exists, which is your experience.
Okay, sure. I mean, I'm curious how you draw further conclusions for that. From that other, obviously Descartes was a rationalist, so that's not exactly the route that you're taking.
Right. So you don't. You just say I exist. That's the starting point, and then there's some difference between the experiences you have. There's a difference between your imagination and your reality. When I imagine a unicorn, I don't see a unicorn in front of me. So there's some difference between these classes of experiences, and I want to some way to differentiate between the two. And the way to do that is with, I have this idea that can accurately predict what my future experiences are going to be. And if that works, that's a good way to differentiate which ones are the imaginary ones and which ones are not the imaginary ones.
I mean, okay. Like, honestly, I'm not fully convinced. I think that Hume's critiques at least like, would you say that you leave yourself open to like at least a level of skepticism? Because that's the only way, like the only way that I see this working is if it's like, okay, I could be wrong, but pragmatically it's true.
It's fallibilism is the technical term. Fallibilism is the position
sure,
you can have knowledge without certainty.
Are you an epistemic fallibilist?
Sort of, yes. So I believe that you can have knowledge without certainty. Yes.
Okay. That's interesting.
It's also the huge consensus in philosophy. Most philosophers are fallibilists by like a huge margin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't know if I do have to go do something really quick. I'm just going to be muted for a little bit. I think some people have questions, so we can just take those really quick.
Sure.
Right. We can go back to asking the questions in the event VC text. And before I ask these other questions, I just want to address the analogy I was reading. I was pretty uncomfortable with reading it, and I apologize if it came off wrong to anyone in the chat, and I apologize to you, T-Jump, if it came off bad or anything. I was just reading an analogy off the VC text.
The sex one?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's fine. You guys are a lot better than like politics and religion. guys are
you're
terrible.
talking
Wait, I'm
about-
so sorry if people were being rude. Like, I definitely try to keep the server in check, but like, I'm sorry.
No, it's totally fine.
This
Like
is
I
not.
said,
This is meant to be a respectful server.
yeah, you guys are a lot better than politics and religion.
Yeah.
So appreciate that. Thank you guys.
Yeah, no problem. This one's another broad question. What is your view on monarchical Trinitarianism? For clarification, you've talked with Sijuwadi, and he's the one who posed this model recently, his type of model recently. And I don't know if you guys have talked about this besides like his evidence for, grounding needs grounding. But yeah, we just want to get your view on it.
Yeah, his model is contingent on the idea that tropes are a real thing and that they have some kind of explanatory power in philosophy. Tropes are highly doubted. No one really, it's a very minute position in philosophy that anybody accepts tropes. And if tropes are real, then he has to limit what kinds of things can be tropes. He has to say that certain kinds of things can't be tropes. And in creating criteria and principles to eliminate alternatives, he defines essentially God as the only kind of potential candidate for a trope in the whole grounding relation thing, the triomny, whatever. And that's the trope that he thinks is the only one that qualifies as a one that can be the founding trope. I reject tropes altogether, but what I did in my conversation with him was I went through the pizza trope. So like if the ontological argument says that God is the greatest conceivable being, and one of the objections is, well, maybe there's a greatest conceivable pizza. And so I took his argument and went through step by step and said, well, is there a greatest conceivable abstract pizza trope? And he said, yes, there is a greatest conceivable abstract pizza trope. And there's infinitely many abstract tropes like of what makes a perfect pizza. And he has to bite that bullet to accept his position.
Right. And the next question is, if a prerequisite for self-defense is intended harm and or murder, and a embryo and or fetus, or whatever you would characterize this as, can't intend such a thing, how can T-Jump use self-defense as an argument for abortion?
Intent is nowhere in the definition of use of lethal force, so doesn't require intent under any circumstances. Just Google use of lethal force, legal terms, none of them have intent as a criterion.
Right. And why is killing something conscious immoral?
Based on, I think, the evidence of morality comes from moral intuition and moral progress. If I plot out the evidence, it seems to lead to the conclusion that any involuntary imposition of will is immoral. That's what I think the conclusion of the evidence is.
Interesting. So how do you ground morals only through naturalism without being utilitarianism?
Moral naturalism. Google Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. Moral naturalism is grounded in many different ways. I think it's just a law of physics like gravity, but it's just the moral law of physics. Higher order emergent property, if you want the technical term.
Right. I guess a more appropriate way to ask the earlier question I asked, if someone fell unconscious while having intercourse and were trapped on top of you, would shooting be justified?
Yes. Said yes. So like if someone is literally forcing themselves in you without your consent, whether they're doing it intentionally or not, you are justified in using lethal force to stop them.
Right.
But if there was like an obvious case, like they're going to stop or wake up eventually and you're not like in a big risk, then it wouldn't be rational. But if literally the only way to get them off of you was to kill them, then yes, it would be rational.
Right. Okay, so another question is I just lost it.
It's not a question. There's no question mark at the end of that.
Hey, don't be mean to me. Okay. So the evolutionary argument against naturalism. Do you have any thoughts on it? I believe Plantinga made this argument.
Yep. So Plantinga's evolutionary argument against naturalism is that we have a reason to doubt our rationality because it's a result of survivability and doesn't select for truth. The problem is that because our brains are a result of inside of being reality, they can't make things that are not in correspondence with reality. So evolution couldn't select for a round square. Like you can't imagine a round square even if you wanted to, no matter how evolutionarily advantageous it may be. It's just impossible. So it can't happen. Same thing, you can't ever believe you exist and be wrong. And so even if evolution can select for many things that are false and built on survivability, it can't make all of your beliefs false. And so as long as you ground knowledge on the ones that can't be false, you're fine.
Right. And another question is, does T-Jump believe parental obligations exist? If so, how does he square with the fact that taking care of children can have long-term and short-term physiological harm, not psychological? Would he say that killing your postnatal children, knowing this fact, is permissible under his characterization of self-defense?
No, because they're not in your body at that point. So if they're not in your body, it wouldn't be self-defense because you just give them up for adoption. So like if they were literally like attacking you or attached themselves to your leg and you literally couldn't get them off, then maybe it would be. But currently, since they're not in your body, it wouldn't be self-defense at that point. Also, because you can give them up for adoption, it wouldn't be justified to kill them. So no, it would not be justified to kill a baby once it's left your body in self-defense. It wouldn't be self-defense anymore. Literally, you could just walk away and that wouldn't be you wouldn't have to kill them.
All right. Okay. So, a response to that from the person who asked the question is, that's question begging. Why does the fact that they are in your body matter?
Well, he said, given my principle, that's my principle is that if they're in your body, the bodily autonomy applies. So it wouldn't be question begging. That's the difference between the case of killing someone outside of your body and killing someone in your body. Why does bodily autonomy matter? I think that's just the basis of morality. The evidence that we have of morality comes from moral intuition, moral progress. And if we follow that pattern and describe a principle, bodily autonomy is a part of that pattern. It's the conclusion of the evidence.
Right. Another question is, even if T-Jump grounds his knowledge on unfalsifiable truth, how can he make the jump from those foundational beliefs to contingent belief like evolution is true?
Well, most of my beliefs are falsifiable. So if you make a prediction, you get it wrong, it's falsified. But it doesn't really it's not really relevant to the second part, which is how do we justify belief in evolution? Novel testable predictions. If evolution is true, then we would expect to see a transitional fossil between a fish and a lizard at this exact location in this exact strata of the geological sphere within 1 kilometer of this particular location. We look there. Oh, look, there's TikTok. We find it. Novel successful predictions gives us reason to believe that that model is correct.
Right.
I have a question. Just sorry, like not to interrupt, but I'm just curious. Like, do you have any? Like, do you also have a political philosophy? Do you subscribe to anything?
Yes, I should be president. That is my political philosophy.
Not something I would support, but kudos. I'm just curious if like you're maybe libertarian or something.
No, I think that the libertarian idea is a great idealistic view for a utopia, and if we had like infinite power, that'd be great, but we don't, so it's not very pragmatic.
Agree there. But my question is, why do you believe bodily, like how extensively do you think bodily autonomy or the right to bodily autonomy prevails, I guess?
The right to swing my fist ends at your face, something like that. So I think that everyone should essentially get their own universe, and they can do whatever they want in their own universe and not be able to touch anybody else's universe. But because we don't have the ability to give our own universes, we have to limit it to essentially
But like,
public spaces.
what do you think of something like, I don't know, vax mandates for,
Immoral.
and I'm not even just talking about, I'm not just talking about COVID, I'm talking about
Measles,
also just
polio.
yeah.
Yeah, I think
everything.
it's immoral to force people to inject something into their body they don't want to do. I think it is not a moral thing to do. I think it can be justified in certain cases. If it's deadly enough, then it can be justified to force people to do it, but it's still going to be immoral. It's still going to be not a moral thing to do to force people to take things.
What normative framework do you subscribe to?
Mine, I wrote a moral model. It's a version of moral naturalism.
Oh, sorry. Like, okay. That's interesting. Okay, that's cool. Yeah, that was all I had, really. Beryl, do you have anything?
Yeah, I was wondering if we could discuss your view on Theseus's ship, because I think I agree with you on some of it and disagree with you on a little bit. And obviously, it's a pretty low stakes topic as far as philosophy goes. So.
Sure. I just had a conversation with Joe from Majesty of Reason. We were talking about this, how the Theseus ship problem is mostly a linguistic one, and that the ontology of what makes something Theseus's ship is the effect it has, like what you're using it for. There isn't really an ontology of Theseus's ship. It's not like a real thing there. It's mostly just a linguistic framework that we use to categorize things. And so the one that's Theseus's ship is the one that's doing the effects that we would expect from Theseus's ship.
Yeah. Well, I guess maybe then like a more concrete example would be like you had your star example where I think I agree that a lot of it is semantic, but I think if we have, let's say, a star at T1 and then it has like 100 hydrogen atoms and we replace one hydrogen atom each year. So by T100, it now has all different hydrogen atoms. I would say that the dispositions of that star have changed ever so slightly. And if two things don't have all the same properties exactly, then now they're different things.
Well, I don't think it's a thing. So like having 100 hydrogen atoms versus having 99, it doesn't somehow gain or lose the property of having 100 hydrogen atoms. So it's not like that's not like a property in the thing. So like if
yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut
I would
you
say
off.
like if we took the sun, like our sun, and we started replacing hydrogen atoms and teleporting them to another solar system or another galaxy or whatever, it'd still be the sun. Like even if we replaced all of them a million times over, we're still going to say that's the sun because it's the thing that holds the solar system in its gravitational well. The number of hydrogen atoms really doesn't matter, because what we define the sun as is the thing that holds all of our planets together in the solar system, and that's really all that matters. So we define it based off of its function, not its parts.
I would agree that it doesn't have to be off its parts, but I think it can't be identical, because if the sun before and the sun after differ even in a millionth of the degree of heat, because when you do different hydrogen atoms, like their spin will affect the chemical interactions they have, let's say. So if we do replace all these hydrogen atoms, presumably the heat of the sun will change a little bit. And I'd say if something changes even slightly, it's no longer identical, even though maybe we could still refer to it. Well, actually, I don't even know if we could still refer to it as the sun, because maybe pragmatically it'd be a good idea. But if we're being exact, now it's not identical to the old sun.
Well, so based on your definition, when you lose brain cells, you're not you anymore?
I hold a very strange view, so probably. But I'm sure that sounds very implausible. I just don't know how you can have a consistent view of persistence. Well, not you, I'm saying, but I don't know how someone can have a consistent view of identity over time. If there are any changes going on, I think you could maintain that you're still a human substance. But I don't know if you could maintain that human substance is identical to the past one.
Well, it wouldn't be by necessity. If they're different times, that'd be some different. They wouldn't be identical over time. But I'd say that you are a specific kind of qualia conscious experience, and that has a particular set of memories and is at a particular location. And no matter how your cells change, because the combination of your cells are producing that particular qualia with particular memories and things, it's still you, no matter what you replace the parts with. So like if you replaced all of the parts with computer parts or uploaded your consciousness, as long as the qualia experience is produced is the same, regardless of what makes it, that qualia experience is still you.
Yeah. So I think we actually agree then that you're not identical, but the question is just how you're defining you. And I think at that point it becomes almost more of like semantic than ontological.
Right. Yeah, because they can't be identical, because if they were identical, you'd be the law of indiscernibles.
Indiscernibles. Yeah. Exactly. All right. Well, I appreciate talking with you and get a little clearer.
Yep. Anytime.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for being up here, Beryl. Just a little of a fun question before we move on for a bit more until you have to go. Since you said in your about me or in your YouTube, you said you're an aspiring POTUS. Yeah.
President of the United States.
Yeah, and what would be your policy?
Oh, I have tons of policies. So I'm a centrist. I think that each party is right about certain things, but wrong about other things. But I think most of it, what they're doing is a complete waste of time, because all the things that we could do to really make a difference are obvious. We can just say, oh, look, these other countries do it better. We can just copy them. Problem solved. Like the prison policy. Our prison policy is absolute garbage. Legalizing marijuana, legalize most non-harmful drugs. That would be great. Make the UPS a savings and loan bank like it used to be. Get rid of payday loans, just replacing them with those things. Have the government do our taxes for us and just send us a bill. So just like what happens in France and the other countries. So we don't have to waste hundreds of hours on taxes that just people have to waste money for TurboTax for no reason. Pay cap for CEOs and shareholders based on the number of employees they have, instead of the minimum wage. So it's based on, as long as you have enough employees paid at a high enough variable rate, then that should be determining what you're paid, not simply profits. You can file there's a certain filing for companies. I think it's like a Corporation B or B Corp, where it's not based off of the obligations of the directors, is not based off of stock prices. It's based off of like benefit to the people or the economy or whatever. And so you file as a B Corp as a standard rather than a profit-based corporation. Let's see, what else? Education, I do a voucher system. Voucher-based education has been proven to work significantly better in other countries. Like the top 10 different countries in the world for education have like mostly voucher systems. Single-payer healthcare, that's been proven to work in most countries extremely well, better than the American one, which is garbage. That's the stuff on the top of my list. Oh, get a new credit score company that doesn't take your points away for looking at your score or applying for credit cards for the bonuses. If you pay off your bills, you shouldn't lose your credit score. All the crap that's just taking advantage of poor people. I just need to end that.
Right. Okay, that's an interesting answer. And going back to the questions now, the evolutionary argument against naturalism from Botinga, we were wondering about bridging the gap, since if these contingent facts can be proven through predictive hypothesis, that will be problematic, because our way to verify their predictive ability would be through survival-based purposes from the original. From the person who originally asked the question.
Well, my objection to the evolutionary argument against naturalism is that not all of your beliefs can be made false by evolution. So it doesn't matter how good for survivability they are. Literally, evolution can't make you imagine a round square. It can't do it. So there are some beliefs that are true independent of whether or not they're products of evolution. And that's what solves the evolutionary argument against naturalism problem. That's solves that. The next thing is then, are we rational to believe beliefs that can predict the future? And the answer is yes. But that's separate from the evolutionary argument, because as long as that is based on the ones that can't be wrong, I think therefore I am or whatever, then you can get to rational beliefs beyond that. But that's separate from the evolutionary argument.
Okay. Next question is, what's your response to the open question argument as a moral naturalist?
The open question argument, G.E. Moore's open question argument. Well, since mine, I don't have oughts. Like as I mentioned with the previous guy, is something moral because you ought to do it, or ought you do it because it's moral? I agreed with his answer. That is, you ought to do something because it's moral. So once you know a set of facts, that this is the set of facts that something is moral, that tells you that you ought to do it. And GE, the open question argument is, well, here's some set of facts, and what is it that makes this moral? And because I'm a moral naturalist, it's correspondence to reality. There is some fact of reality that makes it moral. It's not some analytic abstract like what GE Moore is saying, that it's some other set of properties. So the analytic definition of morality based off of some set of abstract properties wouldn't work. I think it's a law of physics. Like, does this correspond to this law of physics? And that's how you answer the open question arguments. It's a thing in nature. It's a literal physical thing.
Right. So, going back to the sex example, you mentioned that if they woke up within a decent amount of time, you wouldn't shoot, then it'd be fine. But what's the cutoff, since that can parallel pregnancy, meaning that the child will eventually leave the body? Is it 1 hour, 1 day? Is it more than that? What's the symmetry breaker?
The doctors decide. So I'd leave that up to the experts in the field of what determines that, not me. So I'd say if you're going to be trapped there for several months, yeah, you can definitely kill them. Like if it's longer than the time where you'd stop being able to get food and starve to death, yeah, you'd be justified in killing them. So it'd be several days probably. But if you, let's say you had a way to get food or something, then that would increase it to more. So I just leave it up to the experts, the doctors, the lawyers, the legal system.
Okay, interesting. So, I'm scrolling down slowly. I don't want to miss a question by any chance. Okay, so what 5 books would you recommend for us to read?
Books are garbage. Most of what's in books is a complete waste of time. It's just filler, and they have like 5 good points, and then they just fill in examples of the 5 good points. I just go to the distinctions. The philosophical distinctions and the papers on the distinctions are far better than the books that just have pages describing the distinctions. So like, I have a suggested reading list on my Discord of all of my favorite distinctions in philosophy: analytic, synthetic, a priori, posteriori, natural, rationalism versus empiricism, the manifest versus scientific image. Bunch of different distinctions on there that give a good grounding to essentially everything you need to know about philosophy. And so I'd say the books are not really as important as the distinctions. Look up the distinctions.
Okay. Just for clarification, your view on philosophy of mind is more of a it seems to be more of a reductive physicalist position. Am I correct?
Physicalism. It's just physicalism.
Right.
Wait, just to clarify, sorry, I was like kind of just uncertain if maybe I misunderstood or something, but like I was wondering what your normative ethical framework is. I think you said naturalism, so maybe there was some miscommunication. I didn't mean like meta ethics.
What do you mean? So I'm a moral naturalist.
Like in terms of, I mean, the 3 main schools at least are just like deontology, utilitarianism, consequentialism, and virtue ethics.
Mine would probably be some kind of consequentialist based on imposition of will. Least imposition of will is better.
Okay, interesting.
Okay, so Also, I guess further contention added by the original person who was asking a question about what's the symmetry breaker for the sex example. He added that, but you can survive while pregnant and still be able to move. So if it's based on survivability, then carrying to term seems to be obligated as well.
I was just listing that as a factor, determining factor. So in the case of pregnancy, the criterion for use of lethal force, there's like 4 of them. It's called the criterion for great bodily harm. There's another term for it. And the 4 criterion are like 1, risk of death. That one's not really a big concern. The other ones are permanent scarring and disfigurement. And I forget what the other 2 are. But of the 4 criterion for great bodily harm and use of lethal force, pregnancy qualifies as 3 of them. And you can just literally find the legal documents that describe what they are and why it does. And it's literally just written into law. There are a number of legal cases that actually went through this. The survivability thing was irrelevant to that was just an example of what would be the determining factors and whether or not you could lose lethal force in that case.
Yeah, so that's interesting. Another question is, what is the title of those 4 were again?
Those 4, the criterion for use of lethal force is called great bodily harm, and there's 4 criterion for what those are. And if you just Google great bodily harm, they should be listed.
Okay. All right. Yeah, he's found it. So we're gonna go. Does anyone have any more questions for Mr. T Jump that you want to ask? We can't go around for so long.
Yeah, if not, we've been going for about 2 hours. We can wrap up pretty
Barrel's
soon.
typing. Is that the question?
Oh, we're about like 30 minutes from 2 hours. Is that right, Mr. T Jump?
Oh, I came in earlier for the debate section, so I've been here
Yeah,
for about
he
2
was
hours.
here at like 9, I think. So we can wrap up in a little. I think we can just let Joel and Beryl ask like their last questions or whatever.
Right. Okay. Real quick before I continue on those questions, real quick, what do you think is evidence?
Anything that can differentiate imagination from reality.
Okay. Seems to be the same definition from what you said in your server before, so I like the consistency. And also, what is your view on mereology?
Mereology, study of shapes or something. What is that?
Like study of parts and wholes.
Parts and wholes. I'm not sure. Like, is it asking what am I, like a monist that I think everything is one or something? I don't know.
It's more like it's okay. So for example, like there's like mereological nihilism, like there's only wholes. Mereological universalism's like everything is like a whole, I believe. And there's other positions like mereological essentialism. But it's okay if you can't answer the question.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think it's relevant. I think physics has more of a say than the philosophical descriptions of that. So I'd say, don't know.
Okay. And just to double check, person who goes by the name of Doggo, he wants to know if he can DM you a paper and summary of the paper for an interesting argument for the principle of sufficient reason.
Sure.
Okay. All right. So okay, so there is a there's a response to I believe his name is can you help me here? I'm bad with pronunciation on this
Ooh.
part. With what
Can you
what Brill
please
said.
ask him what is? Do you have a response to Nagel's bat argument? So 1, if two things are identical, they're the same in all respects. 2, what it's like to be a bat can only be experienced. This is what I brought up. Okay, anyways. What it's like to be a bat can only be experienced by first-person perspectives, not third-person perspectives. 3, so these are just premises, I guess. A bat's brain chemistry can be studied from a third-person perspective. 4, so mental states and brain states differ in at least one respect. 5, so the brain and the mind are different. So this is kind of like, I did bring up Nagel, and this is what I was referencing. Although, okay, sorry, Monkeydo. Maybe that's how my professor pronounces it. But yeah, that's the argument I didn't explicitly bring up Nagel's
Yeah.
what it's
So
like to be a bat, but
yeah. So my response is that current models of physics can't describe those things, but in the future we could definitely gain a new model of physics that can add in first-person experience as something that we just don't have the ability to access with current models of physics. So I don't think there's anything there that makes it logically impossible that physics will be able to do it in the future.
Another fun question is if you're gonna dye your hair again, what hair color are you going for next?
Whichever one people pay me to pick.
Ah, okay.
Also we do have one other question. What are your thoughts on whether one can know, like whether or not one can know if you exist independent of sensory experience?
What if you exist independent of sensory experience? I don't know what that means.
Yeah,
Like,
that's the question.
like you are the experience. Maybe just
sort of, yeah.
like something has to produce
kind of
the
empiricist
experience.
view, right?
Well,
Because if you,
I don't know exactly what it's
do you
asking.
believe?
Like, I don't. It's
So-
like if you exist outside of your experience, is he asking like, does literally nothing exist but your experience, kind of a thing?
Sort of, but like, are you are you defined by your experience in the sense that, like, just to ask a question, like, what do you believe thoughts are, since you are a physicalist, right?
Yeah, I think it's a chemical process in the brain, but like the cogito kind of a thing where my epistemology starts is just I am the experience, and so it doesn't make a classification one way or the other what it's made of until far later down the epistemic rabbit hole.
Yeah, exactly. So since that experience, so he's asking basically if we can be reduced to sensory experience or experience in general. Okay, the question is simple. Devoid of the senses, touch, smell, taste, etc., can one know that he exists?
Yes. So thoughts, like if you like a brain in the vat, you could be a brain in the vat and still know you exist. You just have illusory experiences. So you could have thoughts, and thoughts are a kind of experience. If you had no thoughts, then probably not.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I think that's all mostly, unless anyone has any last things to add.
There's a couple more questions, and then I think we can just wrap this up finally. So, do you have a degree?
No, I audited classes because I didn't want to spend money, and I started my own business, and so I had no fear of not hiring myself. So I decided to audit and not pay the $50,000 for no reason.
Okay. And how much would it cost to shave your head?
I don't know, $100. That'll work.
Okay, fair enough. And last but not least, we're gonna leave this as like the last question, and then we're gonna wrap this up. So, the cogito assumes an I. So, how would you solve this?
Doesn't. The assumes an I part is the criticism from Russell that the Cartesian dualism says that the I is some kind of a fundamental essence, and that's when someone says it assumes an I, it's that fundamental essence. thingy that is the problem, but mine doesn't assume that. When I say I mean just literally the quality experience. The quality experience is synonymous with the I, and so it doesn't assume anything further than that. And so it doesn't assume anything. It's just like your experience exists, and that's a statement of fact. It's not an assumption because it's literally a thing that you're experiencing. So there are no assumptions in the most basic versions of the cogito. It's only the Cartesian dualism one that has the assumptions problem.
Interesting. All right, so I think that's it. We're gonna wrap it up. I'd like to thank you personally, T-Jump, for coming onto the server and onto the stage to answer any questions for the audience and have a discussion with a couple of people on the stage. And we hope you can do this sometime again. If not, it was still great to have you around here.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Really appreciate it.
Oh, also, just actually, like, I mean, I do really appreciate this discussion. I was not really that familiar with your framework and stuff, so it was really helpful, kind of get a better understanding of it. But if you do want to set up a debate for, I mean, I don't know when right now, but like I have finals and stuff, but like I'd be down. So
Sure, definitely.
Thank you so much for coming on here, though. Really appreciate it.
Yep, thanks for having me on. Thanks for the kind atmosphere and the questions, and I'll talk to you guys later.
Yeah, okay, great talking to you.